So today, my first song, which is the first song on the album, which is called Guns and Drugs, and this is a song that's essentially about the war on drugs, which, as some of you may know, when the government declares war on something, it usually ends up getting worse. You know, there's some amazing statistics about the war on drugs, which is essentially a prohibition, which, as research and data becomes more available, you find that the prohibition is not really a great model for eliminating something, because A, there's always going to be a black market, and B, because of human nature, people are going to seek out and find and procure whatever they want. When you use prohibition, procuring those goods becomes exponentially more dangerous and deadly. And the cost is high. You know, 1 out of every 5 arrests in this overly incarcerated country here in America is a drug-related offense. And, you know, as Bill Hicks used to say, you know, why would you throw a drug user in jail? They're not a criminal, they're sick. You get them some sort of therapeutic rehabilitation instead of throwing them in a prison and not really helping them through the problem, but just kind of holding them and then letting them out, and, you know, creating huge rates of recidivism. So that was one component of this song, was to kind of talk about how, you know, this governmental prohibition is really the wrong approach, and not to mention it becomes overly punitive because of these kind of socio-political factors. You know, especially if we look at the war of drugs, kind of got started in the late 60s with Richard Nixon, and I believe it was his chief of staff who admitted that the reason that they were making such a big deal about this was because they were trying to basically denigrate a lot of the activists. So they tried to tie marijuana to hippies and tied heroin to black people. And what they did was then try to make the association between those two racial groups, and then, you know, really debase those drugs and groups on the news, you know, by connecting them together and trying to turn public opinion against these activists who, you know, for right or wrong, were trying to do something, have like a big movement of the people, for the people, by the people. So that was a component, is to kind of quell dissent with the drug war. You know, since 1971, I believe they spent $1 trillion. This leads to increased sharing of military hardware from the military to local police departments, which obviously is not a great thing. Having these small municipalities with like tanks rolling through the streets, you know, it's because of drug wars, and you know, no-knock raids and SWAT team raids. You know, all of these things based around this prohibition of a particular substance. Who at the same time, I mean, particularly with marijuana, the government holds the patent on the medicinal qualities of marijuana. So you see this kind of dichotomous approach. And it doesn't make sense, which a lot of things in government don't. So beyond, you have this increased incarceration, you have a repression of certain classes of people, disruption of the family unit, increased crime, murder, increased rates of overdoses. All of these things are tied into this prohibition. So then, you know, if you're a person like me, you just kind of keep digging into these things. And the second part of this song, when the song tempo picks up at the end, you know, never let another try to smother you when you're undercover, that section is basically discussing Gary Webb, who was a journalist. I believe it was the San Jose Mercury News, and he uncovered that the CIA was running cocaine into Mena Air Force Base in Arkansas. Not Air Force, I think it was just a regular airport. And in Arkansas, while Bill Clinton was governor. And he discovered this and did this, you know, long, I believe it was a multi-installment set of articles about this. Received, you know, tons of pushback. I think originally from his editors it was okay, and then they started getting pushback from who knows where, and I think he was forced to take it down. And then, you know, because of uncovering this, He was suicided with 2 gunshots to the back of his head because, you know, that's typically how a person kills themselves. And that was kind of, you know, swept under the rug. I mean, you know, people know about it, but it's not this kind of mainstream consciousness that people understand that these drugs are being flown in by members of our own government and then dispensed throughout the country. You know, because like that New Jack City where he said, you know, there's ain't no poppy fields in Harlem. You know, where does this stuff come from? And then so then you can, you know, look at where it does come from, which is, you know, especially with heroines coming from Afghanistan, where we had up until very recently a huge military presence. Cocaine coming from South America, again, we have a huge military presence there, especially, you know, back when that was very popular. Cocaine, that is, although military presence is also very popular in this country. So I really tried to explain a little bit of that as craftily as I could in the end of the song. Weave a web of who's complicit in the lyrics. I use 2 B's, so it's Gary Webb's last name. I mean, I ain't gonna quit it. Mina Air Force Base. I ain't gonna quit it. CIA, of course. Not that clever, but I just want to explain it to you. So that's kind of the gist of the song. It's really about the failing of the war on drugs. And one other thing, I call this Guns and Drugs because that was the original working title. I'm actually a pro Second Amendment person. But again, proliferation of guns as is in the proliferation of drugs is the same sort of government overlord. You know, you look at things like Fast and Furious, where Obama administration gave a bunch of guns to cartels in Mexico so they could trace them and where they ended up. And these guns were like used to murder people in the streets. So you have, again, sure, people can get guns legally, and I'm one of those people, but you know, on the fringes, where does all this stuff happen? Are you trying to destabilize certain lower socioeconomic classes by introducing certain things into those areas? I don't know, but it sure seems like it. So maybe that's a song for another time. But that's all kind of encapsulated in this song, Guns and Drugs. And you can click on the link below and listen to the whole song right now. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you on the next one.